Bright blessings, adventurers, and welcome to my little chat about being Wiccan in an intolerant world. In this video, I want to talk about my personal experiences with prejudice simply because of my chosen path. Tolerance today, obviously, is a huge, big buzzword, right? All sorts of segments of society are being prejudiced against and repressed and bullied, and it's just not right. So today I wanted to share my personal experiences with you guys, and hopefully you guys can share your experiences with me in the comments and create a really good discussion back and forth. So first off, let's talk about some of the history of intolerance towards Wiccanism. Believe it or not, this sort of prejudice has a very long and deep history, dating back to the days of Neanderthals. Shamans, witches, and practitioners of magic in general have always been looked at with a sort of fear. Being hexed or polymorphed was a real fear in antiquity. Something that people thought was going to happen to them on a daily basis, and they had to protect themselves against. So, therefore, the people who dealt with these forces were kept at arm's length. Whenever unfortunate events occurred, it was invariably the fault of the witch next door. When Christianity came to power, the pagan way was simply eradicated. Temples were destroyed, books were burned, knowledge lost, and pagans of all types were persecuted and killed. Holidays and Sabbaths were perverted to serve the new establishment, and over time, the old ways were mostly forgotten. So it began that Wiccans, witches, pagans, and many others were forced to go into hiding. Forevermore, their true love and their true intentions were to be locked inside their own heart, never to be shared with anyone. Goddess forbid if anyone were to suspect that you might be a witch unless a new Salem witch hunt begins. Even just a relatively short time ago, like say 50 or 60 years ago, it was still taboo to worship in any way that wasn't Christian or Catholic in this country. And to some extent, that includes Judaism. Fast forward to today, and the world has changed for the better in a lot of ways. Tolerance is at least a menu item for discussion today, whereas in the past it was just the dream of an idealist. But even so, tolerance still has a long way to go. So now I'm going to relay to you guys some of my own personal experience. First, let me jump out of the script for a moment. So one item of personal prejudice that I experienced was when I was in the Navy. I was overseas and I was visiting Tokyo, Japan. And me and some of my friends, we went to a real legitimate Japanese restaurant, right? We sat down and, finger pointed just random items at the menu, and we were talking amongst ourselves and having a good time. And when suddenly the chef comes running out of the kitchen, brandishing a butcher cleaver, a for real butcher cleaver, yelling at us, screaming at us, gesturing at us, "Round I go home! Round I go home!" And they chased us out of that restaurant, and it's not something that I personally experience on a daily basis, and neither did my friends. And while we were a little bit shocked, it didn't affect us adversely. It was something we could laugh off as we were never going to experience this ever again. But even still, it's kind of sickening that one man can't accept another man for whatever reason. That's not what we should be about. Alright, so how many of you out there have felt discriminated against because of your past? Please share your story in the comments, guys. I want to hear, because I really identify what you guys went through, right? Every time I think about my personal experiences, it just really makes me sad. I just feel like I extended something so delicate and precious, and then bam, it just slapped brutally to the ground for no reason at all. All at once, I felt a loss, but mostly I feel betrayed on such a breathtaking level that I'm left with feeling nothing but just sadness and sorrow. I'm sure that everybody has probably felt this way before, but for me, when it has happened in the past, I feel just like a 5-year-old child being screamed at. Nowhere to go, no comfort anywhere, nothing to hold on to. Just fear and loneliness. I mean, just think about that thought for a moment. How open and naked and helpless you really are. You know, think about being that 5-year-old child, right? If your parents are screaming at you and going off on you, there's nowhere in the world that's safe for you, right? And so that's kind of what I felt like. The first time this happened to me was when I was 16 years old. I was dating a young girl at my high school. I was very proud to be a part of her life at the time. She was extremely intelligent, and we shared similar academic interests. It was at this time that I was first becoming aware of the pagan path, right? I had read a couple of books, and my grasp of what the world could be was changing. At the time, my girlfriend and I had been dating for about, 3 months or so. We were at a senior party. You know, there were a ton of people there. You know how it is. Bonfire, beers, wine coolers, loud music. You know, everybody was having a great time. I had gotten there first, and I was there for, maybe a couple of hours or so before my girlfriend got there. And, when she finally got there, I was like, hey, what took so long? And she's like, well, my car wouldn't start, and I was having trouble with it. And, I had to get a jump, but once I got it jumped and I got here, everything was fine. And I said, all right, that's cool. And so we went about hanging out that night. And, we were there together for at least 3 hours or so. We were holding each other around the bonfire. I was having a couple of beers even though I was driving. She was smart enough to have only one wine cooler. It was a great time. We had a great time there. And all our friends from school were there. And it was really great. So the night was wrapping up, and, it was around midnight or so, and we both had to be home. Even though we were graduating high school, we still had parents to answer to. But as it happened, we were going different directions. She was going one direction, and she was much closer to home than I was, and I was going the other direction, and I had to get going because I had a bit of a drive ahead of me. So we started her car started up without a problem, and while she was getting in the car and getting on her seatbelt, I made an invocation pentagram above her car to invoke the blessing and the protection of the goddess on her way home. She saw me do it. I did it in full view of her. I wasn't trying to hide it from her or anybody else. And there was no look on her face. There was no recrimination. There was no surprise, no nothing. We said goodbye. We kissed after that, and we went our separate ways for the night. I remember the next day or so, I didn't see her at all. Well, the next day I had to work, and I was working for my dad's installation company, so we were putting in really long hours like we do normally in a day. Like 12 hours wasn't uncommon, especially when you included drive time to the job and from the job. And so it wasn't unusual that I didn't see her or hear from her the next day, because it was pretty much a go to sleep, get up, work routine, eat, back to sleep you went, And the next day passed like that, and then after that I kind of became worried that I hadn't heard from her. So instead of calling, I just went over to her house. I didn't think anything was wrong. I wasn't expecting an ambush, and I didn't have any thoughts that anything bad was going to happen. So I parked in front of the house like I usually do, and I got out of my car. I walked up to the house, and literally when I was in the act of knocking, the door flew open, and I'm greeted by her mom, full force with like this 5-pound Bible in her hand and a cross in the other hand, just screaming at me, just calling me the most vile names. Like, what did I write down here? She called me evil. She made some sort of reference to me making love to Satan. You know, all kinds of just nasty, venomous things she said to me. And, you know, I wasn't angry at her. I wasn't really angry at the words that she said. I mean, those were hurtful, right? But not in the way of when I put it into context with my girlfriend, right? I felt completely and utterly betrayed, right? Because when I did that invoking pentagram, that wasn't like the first time that the subject of the occult had ever been broached in our conversations. This is something that we talked about before. She clearly knew of my interest in the path, right? So when I did this, you know, it wasn't a shock to me that there was no shock registered on her face. She took it like in stride, like everything was normal. And I believed that in the moment. But then to find out that she went to her mom and like had some concern that I was in league with the devil or something. Come on. That's just the most, especially from someone of her intelligence, right? Because she was really intelligent, far smarter than me, for sure. And for someone of her intelligence to just lash out in supreme ignorance like that, yeah, to say that I felt betrayed, that's an understatement of the year. It was it was brutal. It was really brutal. You know, I wrote down here that I shared that purest part of me, that childlike innocence, and it was just broken in the most cruel manner. And that's really how I felt. It wasn't, I don't know how I can put it into better words than what I just did there. Has anyone else ever felt like this before? Because I felt like I was at the absolute bottom of the pit. And I mean, I felt bad. I was stunned. I backed away. I think I muttered, "I'm sorry you feel that way," or something like that. And I got to my car and I just got out of there. And for the next couple of days, I was in despair. I was by myself. I wasn't talking to my friends at the time, or at least for that couple of days anyway. And I felt bad. But then, when you feel like it couldn't get any worse, it did. Oh yeah. And even though I should have seen this coming, I totally didn't. So just a quick question here. Is anyone familiar with what it was like to grow up in the Midwest in the mid-1980s? Let's just say that being different is not what you wanted to be if you didn't like friction. So from there, the news of my wedding to Satan at the price of my soul went out far and wide. It was a very difficult time for me. If it wasn't for my friend Jim, I wouldn't have survived this. So I'm very grateful for that. I never would have made it through. So, you know, even though I did talk with my friend, I pretty much just stayed in hiding for the next couple of months because I was getting ready to go away to college. And so if I just laid low, I could put all this behind me. And that's pretty much what I did. You know, in college I found a more friendly and more open-minded atmosphere on the general than you do in high school. I think you meet some more intelligent people there at college, and their attitudes are a little bit more enlightened. So it was a little bit more accepting in college, but I was really keeping stuff close to my vest, you know. I would only share tiny tidbits of information. You know, it took a long time before I was ready to open up and really talk about my path with anybody. It really probably wasn't until my 3rd year of college, I think. So over that time, dealing with people who were both open and closed-minded towards my my path in the craft, I was able to come up with kind of a patchwork solution of how I dealt with closed-minded people. And so I was thinking that maybe this might help somebody else out if they wanted to use this. So really, it's pretty quick. You ask them a couple of simple questions, and then you make a pretty simple statement, and they're pretty well handcuffed after that. So what you do is you ask them a couple of questions. First question you ask them is, hey man, you believe in God? And of course they believe in God. They wouldn't be attacking you if they didn't believe in God. It's their sole motive. So of course they'll answer in the affirmative. And then you ask them another question. And, hey, so since you believe in God, do you believe that God is all-powerful? And like any good Christian, of course they're going to answer, yeah, absolutely, God is all-powerful. God can do absolutely anything. And then you follow up this finishing statement here. All right, so if God exists, and God is all-powerful, and God can do anything, and I believe in absolutely all of those things myself, then why can't God appear to anyone in whatever form or forms would be most comforting and appealing to that person? So the person you're arguing against, they can't refute that. They can't put a limit on God's limitless power. So if God wants to appear as God to John Smith over there, then so be it. And if God wants to appear to me, Daniel Connors, as the god and the goddess in a pantheon of god and goddesses, then so be it. That's just what God will do. You can't put a limit on God's power. You can't put a limit on the form that God can take. And that's basically how you can shut these trolls down pretty quickly. Sometimes I've even steered myself towards an outing, if you will, of my Wiccanism, just to stoke a confrontation when I knew one was going to come. And just like a chess player, you were ready with this gambit and able to smack someone down just as quickly. Now, I know that's not the attitude that we should strive to take, but I was younger, I was brasher, and so yeah, I took a little pride in it. So I'm guilty of that, and I own that now. So, but anyway, that's my discussion about tolerance and how it's affected me, and just what I do to deal with it today. All right, so I want you guys to tune in again with me next time. I'm going to be back on Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific for Rockin' Out with a Witch, a different feature. We're going to take a hard look at a different stone each week. Pun completely, totally intended there. We're going to take a hard look at that rock. All right, so before I go, changeyourstatusquo.com, everybody. Please check it out. Change your life like mine has been changed. Also, everybody, please subscribe to my channel, turn on that bell so you know when I drop new things. Bright blessings, everybody. I'm out.